Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Elevate Your Equity podcast, where investors with a special emphasis on couples begin, continue, and deepen their journey to financial freedom together using the powerful vehicle of real estate investing to do it. Today, we've got a high-powered guest on the show, Miss Camilla Jeffs. How are you today?
I'm great, Derek. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm
Of
excited to be
course.
here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on as well. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm Camilla. I'm the founder and CEO of Steady Stream Investments, which is, I always say it's an education company that educates passive investors on how to get involved in group investing. So I put together groups of people to purchase larger real estate, like apartment complexes, because I spent about 15 years doing it all alone, and that was lonely, and it wasn't nearly as fun as investing with a group and making money with friends, right? So that's what I do now, and I love it.
That's awesome. And how long have you been in the I assume apartments syndication? Is that the
Yes. Uh-huh.
yeah?
Yep.
How long have you been in this space for?
About 3 years.
Excellent. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the journey, right? Let's
Yeah.
back up to where everything started. How did you get this fire to start going into apartment investing? Did you have it when you were younger, or walk us through that?
So I think my husband and I kind of fell into real estate investing through necessity, really. So we got married young, and we were both in college full time, both struggling to make ends meet, had very little money, and we were renting like detached garage from somebody. So like they had converted it into an apartment that, it had a shower and stuff. It wasn't that bad, but it really was this garage that we were living in because that's all we could afford. And it was like $450 a month is what we were paying in rent. And I noticed the landlady would come by and to collect rent because, she liked to just stop by and get it in cash, right? Nobody does that anymore these days. But one day when she came by, I just stopped her and I just said, "Hey, can I chat with you for a minute? I want to understand. I know you own lots of rentals. How are you doing that?" And I just kind of asked her that question. And so we started talking about things. And she's also a realtor. And she said, "Well, you know what you should do is guys should buy a house." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. You don't understand. We are young newlyweds. We have no money. How are we going to, there's no way that we can afford to live in a house. We can barely afford your garage apartment. Right." And she's like, "No, listen, you, this is what you do. You buy a house that has a basement apartment in it, and then you rent it out. And then you wouldn't be paying as much for your mortgage." And that was a very foreign concept to me. I was like, that's really interesting. And so, you know what? That's exactly what we did. We bought a 6-bedroom home that we never could have afforded on our own. It had 3 bedrooms in the basement with a kitchen and bathroom, and we rented that out. And we paid $150 now to live there. And the house had a pool in the backyard. Like, how cool was that? So when we
Nice.
had our first baby, she got to swim in the little pool back with us. But it was amazing. It was amazing. And then I started thinking, okay, there's something to this. And I started talking to my husband about real estate. I started reading all the books. I'm the big book reader in the family. And then I just tell him the information. Right? And he's like, okay. And so we were starting to figure out, well, there's got to be, what else could we do? Right. And our family started growing. We had a baby by then. Um, and so then we're like, well, maybe we could try a fixer upper because the house we bought didn't need a lot of fix ups. We didn't have to do very much, but my husband was kind of itching to do something. He loves to do things with
Hmm.
his hands. And I said, okay, well, let's go see what we can do. And so a couple years after we did the house hack, we bought a fixer upper and we moved in because, best financing, right? Again, we still had no money. We still didn't have very much money. So you can get the best financing by being owner occupied. So very low down payment, really good financing. We move into the property and live in a construction zone for a couple of years, and we taught ourselves construction skills. And I do all the tiling. I'm the chief tiling officer, and then he's the
Oh,
he's like the chief everything else really. That's what he does. But that's the method we used for many, many years. That we would do that every 2 years. We would buy a fixer upper, we'd move in, we'd fix it, and then we'd move out, and we either kept it or sold it, just depended on the market at the time. And that's kind of how we really built our first portfolio.
Excellent. And so when you guys first got started, I mean, did your husband seem reluctant to all this? Like, I know that in the beginning, it's a big responsibility to take on a mortgage and do all that. And there must have been a lot of fear and trepidation when you first started. But can you talk us through a little bit about the conversations you guys both were having at home with the closing paperwork, sitting at the kitchen table, figuring out what you're going to do?
Yeah, I think the fear was just around, it's just always about the unknown, right? Because you don't
Yeah.
know things when you're first starting out. You don't know what's going to go well, what's not going to go well. And in fact, the first fixer upper we bought was a HUD home. And the HUD home, we had to bid on it, and we actually didn't even get to see the inside until after we had bid on it and got it under contract, and so that was scary. That was really scary for both of us. But as we, had these conversations, like, he was excited. He was actually probably more excited than I was to buy a fixer upper and to move in and to
Interesting.
figure things out. Right. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, sure, let's try it. Let's see how it goes. And we ended up both really liking it and liking the strategy.
I love that. Yeah, that's cool. It sounded like it became a partnership in the first sense that you didn't even know you were doing, right? You both were kind
Yeah.
of like, both had an interest that overlapped in real estate, and you guys just took advantage of that, which is awesome. So let's go ahead and fast forward. Obviously, you're flipping houses, kind of like you're living in them and then moving and keeping some and selling some, and you're moving along, right? At what point did multifamily enter the picture, or was there anything else that you did besides moving from house to house to start investing in flips that you weren't living in? What was that transition zone? And then how did you get into multifamily?
Yeah. So at one point, we had just barely had our twins. So we had twin babies. And that was the point where I said, and we got relocated to Indiana. So we got relocated to a new state. And I was pregnant. I was 7 months pregnant with twins. And I was like, can we not do a fixer upper this time? Because I don't think I can handle it with these brand new babies. And I already had a 3-year-old, and it was just a lot. And he was reluctant. He's like, I really want to buy another fixer upper, but but I encouraged him not to. So we bought a newer home. I mean, he was like 5 years old, that didn't need any work. So we bought that one and we moved in, and we were able to live comfortably after we had the babies. But then, of course, 3 months after we have the babies, we're both itching for a project. We're like,
Right.
we need something to do. We need something to do. So that's when we tried like normal flipping, where you don't live in it, and so we bought a property in that city that was really run down, and we actually made a big mistake. This was our biggest mistake property, was this one that we bought, because we went into it thinking, okay, let's buy it. But oh no, we have to put 25% down, because every other house we'd put down was only 5%, right? And so we're like, well, now we can't buy the same size of home that we were used to buying. And so we just had the same amount of money that we just kind of kept rolling around. And so we're like, well, I guess we just got to buy a cheap one. So we bought a really cheap house because it was cheap and not for any other factor, right? Like we were not very scientific about it. We're just like, oh, we know what we're doing. We know how to fix things up. And I had done a little bit of research on it to say, okay, we could buy this property for 30,000. If we fix it up, we could sell it for 55 or 60,000, right?
Mhm.
So that was the idea, is that we could, make some money on it. And then of course we do all the labor ourselves. So we'd save on the labor costs, because typically those are like 70% of the cost of a rehab.
Yep.
But that property was awful. I mean, well, so we went in, we fixed it, and it was fine, except for like the 3 times it got broken into, and they stole all the
Oh
copper
man,
pipes
that's right.
and all these things that happened to it. But once we fixed it up, we were again proud of the work, because the cool thing about doing things like that on your own is you get to turn something ugly into something beautiful, and that's very fulfilling for us. Um, And so we did that. We turned it into something beautiful, and then we put it on the market to sell, and it sat and it sat, got broken
Uh-oh.
into again, and we fixed that up, and it sat and it sat, and nobody would buy it. I couldn't believe it. And I hadn't even priced it really high. Like, I worked with a realtor and they said, "Oh yeah, it's a good price." And no, nobody would bite. So after about 6 months of trying to sell it, we had to rent it. So we put renters, tenants in there. But again, it was super cheap house in a really bad neighborhood with lots of crime, and the tenants trashed it. They didn't pay the rent. I mean, we had all sorts of problems. One of them started the kitchen on fire, and like, it was that point that my husband's like, "You need to watch this movie I watched when I was a kid. It's called The Money Pit."
The Money Pit. I was thinking about
Tom
that.
Hanks, right?
Tom Hanks.
Yes.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. So
Oh,
we watched that
funny.
movie and we cried. We both cried and laughed about it.
Yeah.
But that one really was a money pit for us. And it was crazy because it was a $30,000 home. How can that be a money pit for you? But it really drained us, and, almost caused us to rethink investing in real estate, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's a very, very much a misconception when investors start out. And so I'm loving the fact that you brought this up, because, if you think you know what you're doing and you go into like a C minus D plus or a D class area, and you try to do something like this and everything works on paper well, reality is much different. And I think that you guys discovered that right then. So did you guys get your fill of projects and real estate once you moved in once you moved in there after that?
Well, the dumb thing is that we came to the conclusion that flips don't work.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
like, yeah, flipping's a bad strategy. Don't do that, just because we had like one bad one. From there, we got over it and we're like, no, it was just this one property. And, that drug on for a good 5 to 6 years for us. That property just kind of, we couldn't get rid of it. It was just something that was just always a problem in our portfolio, right? The problem child.
Right.
You got to have a problem child. But we did go on to do more investing, right? And to do more live-in flips. And we actually had a fantastic experience with our last live-in flip that we did, because now our kids are older. So we have 5 children and they're all older, and they're in their teenage years. Most of them are teenagers. And it was so amazing to do it as a family, because they helped us when they were little, but how great are 3-year-olds at helping paint? Well, they really love it, but it doesn't look so great when they're done. But the older kids, man, we did a full gut rehab on this last home that we did, and they can all tile and sheetrock and do baseboards, and they've ripped up. They love demo day. That's their favorite, of course, is they can get the sledgehammer out. And but the amount of learning and work that these kids did, and by the way, it was during COVID, right? COVID struck. And we were actually very, very grateful that we had this project to work on, because all the other families, you're stuck in your home. And in our area, we were literally like almost all quarantined inside our home. Only I could leave to go get groceries. And so what do? Well, we renovated the house. That's what we did, and taught the kids all these amazing skills. And we did really well with that one.
Awesome. And going back to the money pit scenario where, we saw the Hollywood version of how it can test relationships. And I was just curious how did it test your relationship with your husband? How did it make you stronger? And maybe some advice on how you move through that for our listeners.
I think the biggest challenge that I had was that I put the blame on myself, because you see, I'm the partner in the relationship that I do all the investing part, right? Where I find the property, I put it under contract, I do the analysis of it, the financial analysis, I run things in the background, and he is very much the hands-on, right? So he's kind of like the general contractor, and then I'm doing everything else. And so I felt like it was my fault. It was my fault because I made a poor decision and I encouraged him to do this, and right. And so I think that was a big challenge for me, because I felt like I had failed our family, because this was part of our part of the way we made money, right? He had a W-2. I didn't have one at the time because I was taking care of twin babies. And so this was like my contribution to the family, and my contribution to the family was negative. and that was really hard for me. And but the nice thing is that he is very gracious, he's very supportive, he's very kind, and he didn't harbor any of those feelings. I was the one harboring them against myself, right? That I failed, and this is so bad for our family. And he was just like, well, we just got to figure out what to do. We just got to figure out what to do. And I really appreciate that about him. And that's really been his best role for us in our investing and how we do it, right? Because I'm the one who's out there pushing and going and going and going, and then I'll trip and fall, and he'll pick me up and be like, you're fine, dust you off, okay, go again. Right? And I love that.
Yeah. And can I say that, your contribution of twin babies and then later on, like total 5 babies, that's a pretty,
I was going to say that's pretty big.
So let's
yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful to do.
So, okay. So that's awesome. So you guys are working through some of these flips, and when did the light bulb go off in multifamily?
So at some point, I can't remember the light bulb moment, but there was a moment that I was like, this is a lot, because the sheer organization of it, if you have so many single family homes, and we had been moving across states, and so we had homes in other states too. And so just the volume and managing like 10 different utility bills in different states, the way that all works, it just got to be a lot. And so I was thinking, how can we do this? Because we had read that one book that's One House at a Time. I think that tells you, if you buy one house every year for 10 years, you'll be set for life, essentially, is the whole premise of the book. So I was like, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to buy one house at a time, because we felt like that's what we could afford. But then I started realizing that if a tenant moves out of one of my single family homes, my revenue is zero, zero. And then I started looking at things like a fourplex. I'm like, well, wait a minute. If a tenant moves out of a fourplex, then the revenue drops to 75%, right? But it doesn't drop to zero. It would be rare if it dropped to zero, if all 4 moved out at the same time. So I'm all about safety and security in my investing. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Camilla, we have been doing this the risky way. Like, doing single family investing is actually riskier than multifamily. And some people think it's the opposite. They think multifamily is riskier because it costs more and there's more tenants to deal with. But really, that's your safety, right? Is having lots of tenants in there. So our next step was a fourplex. We bought a fourplex, and we really enjoyed that. It went really well from a numbers perspective. Things went really well, but again, we were DIY. Like, we were over there mowing the lawn. I mean, my husband took my son with him to mow the lawn, and okay, we had let it go for a while. The weeds were really tall. And that's when we learned my son is allergic to weeds, because his eyes started like literally bulging out of their sockets. We had to take him to the hospital. We're like, what did we do to you? Oh my gosh, it was so funny. Well, it wasn't funny at the time. It's funny now.
It's funny now, but maybe your son, as he hears this on the podcast, is like, okay, yeah, thanks, Mom, for that.
Mom. Thanks, Mom.
I'm glad that you got humor out of it. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but yeah, he sees those pictures. He's like, whoa.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was pretty crazy. But it was this moment, and then all those little moments like that were kind of building up to maybe DIY is not the best avenue, right? Like, we've learned a lot, and DIY has served us very well to help position us to be in a different, to think about things differently. But now we really got to think about things differently. And that's where it got hard for us, to be honest, because we had only just relied on each other. And then I start looking at, well, how do I buy like 100-unit apartment complex? What would that look like? And there's no way that we could afford that on our own. Like, they cost millions of dollars. We did not have millions of dollars in our bank account. And so how do you even buy these? And you realize that it's partnering with other people, and that's not your spouse. And suddenly you're like, but I don't know them. I don't know,
Mhm.
I don't know if they're going to. And I think one of my big things was I knew I would trip and fall, right? Like, remember, I've tripped and fell a bunch of times already. Well, I don't think my track record will be any different as I move forward, because I'm willing to take the risks, right? And if you're willing to take the risks, you're going to trip and fall once in a while, but you got to be willing to get back up. But again, I have my partner, my husband, who's gracious and is okay with me taking risks and falling and then getting back up and moving on. But I'm like, well, would a different partner do the same? Would they be as gracious and kind with me? Or do I have to be perfect? Do I have to be perfect? And that was a lot of anxiety and stress on myself to try and be perfect at something, because I knew I wouldn't be.
I love, the perspective that this must be, looking back on these stories and understanding how true multifamilies are done. You must smile at some of those memories, thinking that like it's going to be way better than you're thinking right now,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're going to trust yourself. You're going to make the right decisions. So I think that that's really cool to be able to look back on that. So thank you for sharing that insight. Could I also ask you too, of all of the properties that you've done so far, because it sounds like we're now in the multifamily realm, and maybe I'll ask some questions about how you exactly got going there too. What was the best property or transaction that you've done up to this point? Was this after you got in multifamily, or is this before? What do you think, if we were to ask you that question?
I think the best transaction we did was the most recent live-in flip that we did with our family. Like I was talking about, with through COVID, and for multiple reasons. So, I mean, yes, we made really good money on that. It was the most money that we had made, that we
Mhm.
made on any property, right? Put that aside, the learning that happened from that property for my children was gold. It was
Mhm.
just golden for them, because the whole time that we're working side by side and we're tiling the bathroom, or, like learning how to caulk, that's hard, by the way. Caulking, getting it right
That
is
is
really
hard. Yes.
Oh
hard.
man.
But we're, teaching the kids how to caulk, or I'm caulking, but we're constantly talking about investing in real estate and what this does for us. And so all of those conversations have planted many, many seeds in my children's brains. So then we sell the house and we pay the kids. So we made good money on it. And we decide, you know what, we're going to take this to the next level with our kids in their investing. So we paid them for their hard work. They totally earned it. And we told them, okay, part of this is for fun, right? You can use this to buy something fun. My son bought himself a full suspension mountain bike. He's so excited. And then the rest of this money, the bulk of it, 80% of this money, is going to wait until we buy our next. We're going to invest in a short-term rental as a family. And so that's what we did. We took the time, we found the right property that's it's like a vacation home, right? And so it's doubling as a vacation home for us and an investment. And every kid put their percent in, right? So each kid owns 10% of that short-term rental. They are now earning passive income on the income that they earned they worked for. And we get to use it as a family, and it's so fun. So like we went up there and we got to use it just the first time a couple of weeks ago, because I bought it in a good area because it's booked out all the time. Like, like when are we supposed to be able to go use it? But I
Yeah.
finally booked some time. We go up there as a family together and we're talking about, okay, what are some things we can do to make this property more profitable? Right? What do you guys think? What do you think? We should change out the decorations? Do you think we should put more beds over here? Or, what are the things that we can do to make it more profitable? And the kids are all into the conversation, and then at some point, we're sitting in the hot tub and I'm like, isn't this amazing, you guys, that we can use this and we don't have to pay for it. In fact, it's paying us to be here.
Mhm.
And the kids are like, yeah, this is so cool. And then one more quick story on that is that my kids' friend's dad asked them, and my twin daughters are 16 now. And he asked them, he's like, do you guys have a job? And they're like, no, we don't have a job. He's like, well, what do you do for income? They're like, oh, well, we have income. He was like,
That's so
wait,
funny.
what? And so they explained they have passive income from a real estate investment. And he was blown away. He was blown away that
That's
a
cool.
16-year-old kid has that.
It's like the rich dad, poor dad scenario, right? They're probably getting all of these light bulb moments. And
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, that must be really, really awesome to see that legacy thing happen. Like all those, like you said, all those seeds are getting planted. And you said they're both 16, right? Your twins.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so as they go off into the world, like they'll always have that rooted feeling. And my parents did an awesome job raising me, and there's nothing that I would take back from that. But if I had an experience like that, I would be so much further along. So I'm sure that that your kids are going to be thanking you for it as well. So way to go. And also great job setting an example for all those listeners out there who may be on the fence about investing in real estate, and perhaps maybe to bridge that conversation, bridge the gap of the difference between you and your spouse wanting to make the decision to do something legacy wise. This might be that one thing that may bridge the gap between why it makes sense to try to give your hand at real estate investing, or getting more active in trying to find ways to create income by doing what you guys did, which was moving into a house. And then every 2 years when you requalify for that nice single family loan, moving into the next one, and just keep doing that over and over again. So thank you for sharing all that. It's good stuff. Very visceral and good things for our listeners to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you now, as we go into multifamily, right? Like now we're doing syndications, right? You have syndication business. That takes a different skill set, and it takes a different type of business mentality to get that going. Can you talk us through how you were able to grow that with your guys's fix and flip recent experiences in mind, and also with your husband's mentality of let me go in there and do that, now that you're moving away from this do-it-yourself mentality? How did all that work?
Yes. And that's the tricky thing. And in fact, like my kids, they love to renovate too, So the latest apartment complex that I was buying, my daughter's like, oh, is it one we can go fix up? I'm like, well, no. We have people that do that now. And she's all disappointed.
Oh.
So I have to think about that for next year. We need to get a project for them to do something more hands-on next year, because passive investing is cool, but it's not as, it's not tangible. It's not tangible, and kids and my husband need tangible things to do. And so yeah, apartment investing, you're right, is a very different skill set. It's almost like you're running a business. It's not you're not doing any hammering. You're not doing any, you're not running to Home Depot every 2 days to pick up supplies. You are literally, I feel like I'm running an online business now, right? I don't go to the properties very often. The business that I'm running is just all about finding people who want to invest, but don't want to be a landlord, right? Maybe they don't want to have the experience that I had for 15 years of swinging the hammer, but they still believe real estate is a really great avenue of a place to invest their money. And so my job is to find them, educate them, and help them find opportunities to invest.
Right.
So you're right, very different. And in terms of like the couple aspect of it, it's not something that, it's a skill set that I have developed. It's not something that he's all that involved in. And so he's a tech guy also, right? So he has a technical W-2. And so he helps me in all the tech stuff that I need to do for the business, which is really nice. But it's a very different, right? It's like we're running a business, but real estate is part of it, but it's not the same hands-on experience that we've always had. So it does feel a little bit very different to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys talk a little bit about how you guys share in the business right now? Because I know you guys have grown it together, swinging the hammers, but now you guys, it's a different business now. So do you guys have defined roles, or do you guys talk every day and kind of tackle it together? How do you guys do that?
Yeah. So the way it works now is the majority of it is me running this business, right? And then he acts as my support and confidant. And I talk to him all the time about it. He sets up systems for me if I need systems to be set up. And so really that's how it works. But the majority of it is me running the business. So I'm the CEO and founder of the business. And then he's just kind of my biggest support and willing to take the kids if I need to fly out to a conference and whatever. He does all the kids stuff that has to be done and make sure that the household runs efficiently and smoothly because we still have a lot going on because I got lots of kids, right?
Yeah. Beautiful partnership though, because yeah, it's important.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Camilla, let's kind of come full circle too, because you started off saying that when you were having twins, you didn't feel like you were contributing. And so, and of course, we want to specify that that was more monetarily, right, at that time.
Yes.
But now you've become CEO, founder. You have all of these skills underneath your belt, your journey, and a lot of our listeners are females who may have the preconception that, wow, it's a male dominated space. How do I do this? My mind doesn't work that way. There's a lot to learn, intimidation, whatever it is, the insecurities, you name it, right? Now they're hearing you speak. What advice do you have for all of those listeners, especially the female listeners that are perhaps having doubts, but want to move into this space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when you say all the insecurities, like I felt them. I felt them 100% because I remember my first real estate conference I went to, there was a multifamily specific real estate conference. And I walked in that room. There's like 800 people there and less than 100 are women, right?
Yeah.
And, looking around the room, it's very intimidating. And until you experience being the minority, you don't understand it, right? And so there's been times in my working career where I was not the minority, and then I moved to another state and suddenly I am the vast minority, right? And it's tangible. It's a tangible feeling that you have when you walk in a room and you're like, I don't look like anybody here. And so then you automatically, your brain goes to, well, because you don't look like anybody here, that means you can't be successful because you have to look like them to be that successful. And I think that, I think finding people who do look like you that are having success in the business is really important. And so that was really important for me, was to find other women who were actually doing it. And so I started seeking that out. And once I started seeking for it, it came, and I found a whole bunch of women who are doing the same thing that I'm doing, who I can talk to. And like it's so refreshing when you find people that are doing things that you want to do and that look like you and talk like you and have the same kind of experiences that you've had. It's just very, very helpful to that. Of course, you can learn from people who are different than you. And I always advocate, learning, trying as much as you can from other people. So my advice to other women who want to build a business like I have done is, number one, you can totally do it, right? Like you don't need to have some special skill set. You don't need to have some special personality. I mean, I'm an introvert by nature, right? And I felt like I had a lot of cards stacked against me. So I'm an introvert. I'm a woman. I've never partnered with anybody. Right. So I mean, you name it, I could list a whole bunch of reasons why I should not have been successful in this business, because that's what my mind was telling me. But your mind is dumb sometimes and it tells you the wrong things, right? It like literally, because it wants you to survive, and it thinks, oh, wait, you just walked into an environment where you might not survive. So back away, walk out, and you have to fight your mind sometimes to say, no, I have a goal. I want to get there. I know what I want to do. But so number one, you can do it. Number two, find other people who are like you, who are doing it in the business, so you can feel like you can achieve this goal that you have. And then, number three, just take small steps every day. Like, don't be in a rush for success. There's no reason to get all anxious about, oh my gosh, I need to have 1,000 doors in a year, right? Like, don't set a goal like that. Set a goal that, okay, every day I'm going to meet one new person, and every day I'm going to, educate myself in some shape or form, right? And I'm going to take some small action. I'm a big fan of small actions. I'm not a big fan of 10xing or 100xing things. That's not how I function. It's not how I work. Just take small steps every day. And the really cool thing about this business is it's a momentum business. And the more you can just continue those small steps every day, you're going to, 2-3 years from now. And this is exactly what I'm experiencing in this moment is I'm looking back at the last 3 years of this multifamily journey, and I've surprised myself. I'm surprised by the success that I've had. And it's a really beautiful thing. And now I'm like, okay, I've achieved something pretty great. And so now I'm thinking 2022, what's the next step?
Mm.
The next step for me in 2022 is just to flip the script, right? I've been working so hard to build my business. 2022 is going to be more about building business for other people, like having a much like a focus a lot more on others, and how do I help more people get involved in real estate and benefit from the impact it can have both on your pocketbook and your family and the communities that you're building. Like, I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, really, really well said. I love the fact that you're like taking people step by step through the mindset, mind traps that we get into, and then reminding us that it's a momentum-based business, which is 100% correct. Like, we've experienced the same thing. And right now, you guys are up to how many units and how much under management right now?
Up to about 800 units and 80 million under management.
Yeah, that's
Amazing.
very impressive, and doing this, doing this with a family at home, and with all these things, like you have a very busy life, so it's very impressive what you built. And one last question that I have before we head into the rapid round, at least from my end, and if Sophie has one, she can ask after me. But it is, if you had to do it all over again, what do you wish that you had known starting out?
So this is always an interesting question because I'm not a fan of like knocking on my experience, because I feel like every experience I've had has put me to be in this position that I'm in right now. I think the only thing I would say is maybe learning about group investing earlier, because I didn't know about it for 15 years. So I think if I had learned about it a little bit earlier, I would have jumped in earlier. Yeah.
Perfect answer. I totally understand where that's coming from as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment, Camilla, like, again, you're a breath of fresh air. And I love how you said everything was, you could list everything that could be stacked up against you. And my favorite quote was, our mind is dumb. I'm gonna write that on Post-it note because it's true. Our minds set us up for survival and not necessarily, and it can be somewhat of an illusion. So thank you for shining light on that. And the fact that sometimes, that uncertainty, that discomfort is healthy for us.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's actually a sign that you're moving in the right direction.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You're uncomfortable, you're uncertain, you're like, I just don't know. Sometimes that's your like gut telling you, yeah, this is the right place you got to go. You got to stretch, you got to grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally agree with that. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Camilla. Did you have any questions, by the way?
No.
You don't? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Camilla, for being on the show. But we do have one last segment, and then we're going to open up the floor for you to tell people how they can find out more about you. But so we were going to ask you 5 questions that we ask every one of our guests, and they're meant to be answered in a 30-second or so time frame, just so that they're quick, right? Yeah, exactly.
Time me?
Pressure, exactly.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. You want to read the first one?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so first question is, what book has had the biggest impact on you and why?
So the book that had the biggest impact on me is one I read when I was 16. and it was called Finding Comfort Outside Your Comfort Zone. And it was fascinating, right? And I think that's really a superpower that I've developed, is I live just barely outside my comfort zone. I don't live really far outside my comfort zone, but I live just barely outside of it all the time. And you know what happens when you do that? Your comfort zone grows, right? So if you continually like get uncomfortable just a little bit, don't go too far, because then your brain will explode. But you can definitely grow. And that's how I feel like I've been able to grow.
Excellent.
Lovely.
Love that. I never even heard of that book, but it's definitely something we're going to look on Amazon and pick up later today. Number 2, if people wanted to emulate your success, what's the first actionable thing that you think that they could do to follow in your footsteps in a way?
So first actionable thing is definitely get educated, right? So you need to educate yourself on the business that you want to build, but then start going to meetups. And I don't say that lightly, because like I said, I'm an introvert, and going to meetups was really hard for me in the beginning. But it's a very, very important step, because in this industry, you're going to find success by the who's, not the how's. That's another really great book, Who, Not How. Right?
Yeah, very good.
You need to find the people who can help you to get to where you want to be. Because I'm not here, I'm not at this success alone. I did not build this alone, right? I have partners. I have many, many partners who helped me get to where I am today. And that's because I, again, got out of my comfort zone a little bit and went to a meetup. I met one person there, and then I went home, and it was okay. But like just doing that and will really help you in your journey.
Yeah, and I know that this is kind of out of format here, but I did want to also mention too that you talked about getting, in more or less fashion, 1% better each day, right?
Yeah.
Through the comfort zone thing. And then also earlier on in the conversation, I remember we talked about doing one thing to just like move the needle a little bit over time. And I think that that really compounds on itself, and I can definitely tell that has worked in your case. So thank you for that. Okay, next one, sorry.
And then next question is, what small thing do most people not know about you?
Small thing. Well, most people don't know that I grew up on a farm, and I am one of 10 children. And so I'm the third of 10. So, I mean, I have 5 kids, right? But that's only half a family. Yes, my mom. But yeah, I'm one of 10 children. So I'm the oldest daughter of the group, and grew up on a farm, and I would ride horses every morning up the mountain. The mountain was our backyard, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful childhood.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's something that we want to do, is get a bunch of land. That's actually my dream.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. I was going to ask you, holiday times must have been very interesting, fighting over the Christmas gifts and so forth.
Well, there were a lot of gifts.
I bet there was.
There's 10 kids. I mean, if everybody got like 2 or 3 gifts each, well, and then we'd all give to each other. So
wow.
Yeah, I mean, there were like 100 gifts to open on Christmas.
That's awesome.
It lasted a long time.
I can imagine. All right. Question number 4. How do you like to unwind and restore your own creative juices individually?
Oh, I love to be in nature. So if I can, anything in nature really helps me to unwind and restore. I also like to read. And then I love to laugh with my kids. Like they're so funny. They're teenagers now, and teenagers are hilarious human beings. And it's just so much fun every night. Like dinners are just, we're all just rolling on the floor laughing sometimes.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Do they talk to you in emojis and stuff like that, and acronyms?
Yeah. Yes, and like my son, he just does one-word answers when I text him.
Yeah, of course. I love that. All right.
And last question is, what is your favorite family vacation spot?
Oh, favorite spot. Oh gosh. Well, we're very adventurous and we like to experience new things. So I wouldn't say there's like a certain place that we always like to go back to, but we love cruising. Cruising has been our favorite, and been so bummed that we couldn't go on one for the last couple years.
Yeah, COVID's kind of put the lockdown on that.
I know, it's so bad. And now I'm still nervous to even like try to go on one.
Right.
You know, we want to try next year, but anyway, we've loved cruising. It's the perfect family vacation because everybody can eat whatever they want, right? You don't have to like worry about, oh, if we go to Taco Bell, then Reagan's gonna hate it and she's not gonna eat anything, or all your entertainment in one place. You don't have to buckle anybody in car seats, and it's perfect. Everybody can find something to do.
That's so cool.
I remember we thought that also when we were going to Hawaii. Remember we did a cruise ship to Hawaii, and we're like, it's like you have a hotel, you have food, you have service, you have entertainment, like
transportation.
Yeah, everything's there. Your transportation from port to port. So like it was, yeah, I could totally relate with that. That's awesome. Cool. All right, cool. Well, Camilla, thank you so much for coming on the show. But before we let you go, so you can have the rest of your day to continue working on those deals, how can people find out more about what you have going on or get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can get in touch with me by just hopping on my website, camillajeffs.com. I put out a lot of educational material. You can connect with me there. You can join my investor group, and I teach classes, and just really happy to connect with anybody who wants to learn how to grow a business like this. It's not rocket science. It's just copying what other people have done, and I'm happy to show you the way.
Excellent. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that are going to be taking you up on that offer who are listening along with us, because this has been fascinating, very interesting. And also, we really appreciate the transparency and the willingness to share all the stuff that happened in your early years. It's always really fun.
Yeah.
The relationship with your husband and all of that good stuff. So thank you for that.
You bet. I'm an open book. So
love
whatever
that.
you want to ask.
Love it. And for all those listeners out there, thank you guys so much for listening to the show. And if you want more of this and want to hear more high-powered guests like Camilla, please like, comment, subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to the podcast, because we want to attract more people to listen and also get those great guests to come in and provide tremendous value. So please make sure you do that. It also helps appease those algorithm gods so that we can find ourselves going up the SEO chain and getting involved with more and more people. So please do interact with us. We want to hear from you. So that being said, I don't have anything else to add. Did you want to say anything else? Yeah, this was really, really fun. So thank you again, Camilla, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've had a blast.
Yeah, it was super fun. Super fun. All right. Well, thank you so much. This is Derek.
And this is Sophie.
We're signing off for the day. Thanks, everyone. Take care.